Hello, everyone, and welcome to Idly By, a podcast discussing voting rights in America. My name is Zach, and I'm accompanied today by Garrett, Michelle, Sophia, and Zane. And today we're going to be discussing voting rights in America through three lenses of analysis. First, we're going to be talking through its historical context, beginning with the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment, and ending with the 1965 Voting Rights Act. Next, we're going to be talking about it through its current context with the Georgia Voting Act and the 2013 Amendment to the Voting Rights Act, along with the 2019 and 2021 for the People Act. And then lastly, we're going to be discussing some organizations that you can assist and volunteer and donate towards to preserve, protect, and promote voting rights in America today. So first, we're going to be discussing the historical context of voting rights, and we're going to pass that off to Garrett. So Garrett, take it away.
Thank you so very much, Zach, for that lovely introduction. First things first, I would like to say hi to all my counterparts within Group 6. Zach, pleasure to see you on the interwebs. I'm still trying to figure out your drink order. Michelle, I hope to hear you play the drums at some point after this whole COVID thing. Zane, I'm surprised that you do not look like a young Larry David, but I'm still impressed nonetheless. And Sophia, where's your cat? I mean, we have other classes together. How come your cat's not with you? But I know the reason why. That's a rhetorical question. Please don't answer. But it's lovely to see everyone within Group 6. Once again, I'm going to give some context. We got to go back in time a little bit, provide a origin story, if you will. Except this particular origin story isn't the comic book origin story that we're accustomed to because of certain companies that are available, which I would say is a fantastic series to watch on a different channel, but I'm not going to go into that. Anyways, once again, providing some sort of origin story. This particular origin story, unfortunately, has a character that is a racist, discriminatory, disenfranchising ideology that has pretty much affected generations upon generations of the African American community. And we're going to go all the way back to the end of the Civil War, which ended around 1865. Now, at that time, around 4 million of Black men and women had been given freedom, and one of their first priorities was gaining full rights as citizens of the United States and the ability to vote. And that was key to securing pretty much true freedom. I have to quote Frederick Douglass, who famously said back in 1865 that slavery is not abolished until the Black man has the ballot. And the way that the ballot was able to get into the hands of Black men at that time was pretty much the implementation or the creation of the 13th and 14th and 15th Amendment, better known as the Reconstruction Amendments. Now, the 13th Amendment is pretty much building upon the Emancipation Proclamation. Now, the Emancipation Proclamation back in the early 1860s stated that, hey, slavery is pretty much done in these certain states, but not throughout the entire country. That was what the 13th Amendment was all about. Now, in the verbiage of the 13th Amendment, it's pretty much within Section 1, and I hope to give it justice. Pretty much it states that neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. And that was the 13th Amendment, which was ratified back in 1865. Now, this next amendment that was able to pretty much grant voting rights to African Americans was the 14th Amendment, which was ratified back in 1868. Now, the verbiage that pretty much states what it's all about is within Section 1. And it says that all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the law. Now that verbiage pretty much states that, hey, African Americans are citizens. There's no longer that 3/5. They are a citizen, full citizen of the United States, thanks to the 14th Amendment. Now, the final amendment within the Reconstruction Amendments, the 15th Amendment, pretty much granted the voting rights to African Americans. And it states that the rights of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of race, color, or previous condition of servitude. Now, as amazing and pretty much entitling those amendments were to the African American community, there were severe loopholes within those amendments that pretty much stated that, hey, if you committed a crime, your rights will be revoked. So your rights of not being a slave, hey, that's going to be taken away if you committed a crime. Your rights of being a citizen, that's going to be taken away if you committed a crime. Your right to vote will be taken away if you committed a crime. So those in power, such as white land owning men, pretty much created laws and codes to pretty much disenfranchise the African American community during that time. And this is a great point where I'm going to pass it on to my good friend Zane, who looks much better than a young Larry David, in my opinion. He's going to go over the black codes and what is it, uh, uh, John Crow
Jim
laws, I believe. Is
Jim
that right?
Crow.
Jim Crow.
Jim Crow.
Jim. I need to get my J's right. But anyways, passing it on to Zane.
Awesome. Thank you, Garrett. Yeah, like Garrett said, there were tons of loopholes formed to get around the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment, these being the black codes and then later on the Jim Crow laws. Black codes included things like the grandfather clause, which was enacted and stated that only men whose ancestors that were eligible to vote before 1867 would be able to vote, which disenfranchised many of the African American population at the time, as their ancestors did not meet that criteria. Black codes also restricted the type of jobs that African American people could have and their ability to leave that job. Certain states restricted the type of property that African Americans could purchase. And it's important to note that even after the Reconstruction of 1867, the Reconstruction Act of 1867, which gave African American men the right to citizenship and the right to vote, African American women were still unable to vote, as women were not given the right to vote until later on in the 1920s. Further down the line, we have Jim Crow laws, which enacted literacy tests as a way to suppress African American votes. African Americans were given extremely difficult legal documents to read, administered by a white clerk, while white men were given much easier documents. Some Southern clerks would require African American men to recite the entire Constitution in some circumstances. In some areas, African Americans were just flat out denied the opportunity to register to vote. By 1940, the percentage of eligible African American voters registered in the South was only 3%. Things luckily got slightly better with the Voting Rights Act of 1965, as the act banned the use of literacy tests. It also provided federal oversight of voter registration in areas where less than 50% of of the non-white population had not been registered to vote. It also authorized the U.S. Attorney General to investigate the use of poll taxes in state and local elections. Although when the act was passed, the local and state enforcement of it was weak, it allowed a legal route for African Americans and other disenfranchised communities to challenge any oppressive treatment that they may encounter when attempting to register to vote. Unfortunately, its weaknesses were further exploited in 2013, as Michelle can tell you more about.
Thanks, Zane. So, yeah, in 2013, there's this huge court case called Shelby County versus Holder, in which the Supreme Court ruled to repeal Section 4 of the Voting Rights Act. And so Section 4 originally made it so that jurisdictions with a history of discriminatory voting laws had to have new voting laws approved by the federal government. And so kind of what we're seeing now is a product of this. And so right now there's lots of voting laws coming about in states like Iowa, Arizona, Georgia, Texas, Florida, that are suppressing votes. And so one of these big ones is what is the Georgia voting law, and it's 98 pages long, and it does all sorts of things to take the power away from the voters, and especially communities of color within Georgia. So of the huge amount of things it does, some of the big ones are that voters now have less time to request absentee ballots. There are really strict new ID requirements for absentee ballots as well. And it's illegal for election officials to mail out absentee ballot applications to all voters. They're also going to be limiting drop boxes and mobile voting centers. And then lastly, they're also expanding early voting in small counties, but not in more populous ones, which is really a disadvantage to communities of color since they tend to be in the more populated areas of the state. But all hope is not lost. There's going to be new legislation, hopefully, that will kind of save us. And Sophia will talk about that next.
Thanks, Michelle. So as Michelle was just discussing, to date, there have been more than 360 bills to restrict voting access that have been proposed in 47 states. 108 of those restrictive voting bills were introduced in less than 5 weeks this spring of 2021. However, there is the For the People Act. This act was first introduced in January 2019. The bill passed in the House, which was Democratic majority at the time. However, it was blocked by the Republican-controlled Senate. So this bill has now been reintroduced in 2021. It's called For the People Act, or also HR 1 or S1. So this actually just got passed in the House March 3rd, 2021. So this bill addresses voter access, election integrity and security, campaign finance, and ethics for the 3 branches of government. So specifically, this bill would expand voter registration by having automatic and same-day registration available. It would also expand voting access. It would have voting by mail and early voting. It would require 15 days of early voting for federal election. So if passed, ultimately, it will make it easier to vote altogether. It would also have expansion of reducing the influence of big money in politics and strengthen ethics. So this bill would require every state to adopt automatic voter registration systems and every voter to have the ability to vote online, to register to vote online. Also, this bill requires the president, the vice president, and certain candidates for those offices to disclose 10 years of tax returns. So this is a very critical bill that needs to get passed in 2021. And this is the biggest election law and political reform package that we've seen in decades that would make a major impact on our democracy. And now you can go ahead and take over, Zach, and we can talk about what we can do as people.
Yes, thanks everybody. So when discussing what you can do to protect, promote, and preserve voting rights in America today, I would just like to briefly discuss some great organizations that we have here in America that you can dedicate your time or finances to that really have a prominent impact and that also serve different facets of the community. So first, I would like to talk about the American Civil Liberties Union. Now, they are a huge nationwide organization, and right now, just to give you reference on what they're up to, they currently have 2 lawsuits against Brian Kemp and the rest of the Georgia registrars that are promoting the Georgia Voting Act that we were just discussing previously. Furthermore, they also have a petition on their website that you can go and sign that is to go ahead and pass the Voting Rights Advancement Act, which would be a reversal of the 2013 ratification to the 14th Amendment that we were discussing also earlier. Furthermore, there's the Brennan Center for Justice, which is a great informational port for voting right information and where it is currently standing in America. So you can just go ahead and join their mailing list or their email mailing list. Then we have the NAACP, the League of Women's Voters, and the Asian American Advancement of Justice. Those are 3 separate organizations that definitely represent the oppressed minority groups that these anti-voting right legislations predominantly affect, right? So you can go ahead and volunteer your time, effort, and money with them. Furthermore, there's an organization called Common Cause. They're a really outstanding organization that goes ahead and fights against gerrymandering. Now, gerrymandering is the construction of the voting districts within counties and within states that can try to balance the voting process to one way or another. And they go ahead and fight against that. So that's another great organization to support. Lastly, for any of those watching this that have young people in their lives, there's another great organization called Rock the Vote. They specifically target young people, high school age there, to go ahead and get them involved with the voting process and understand, where voting rights are in America today. And then lastly, the last organization I would like to discuss that you can really donate your time to coming up in the next upcoming elections, whether that be the midterm or the general election, would be called the organization Let America Vote. Now, what they really strongly suggest that you do when you go ahead and volunteer with them is you actually go ahead and hit the streets and you knock on doors in those communities that have been marginalized and that don't have high registration counts, and etc. So if you really want to feel as if you yourself are making a physical difference, you can go ahead and volunteer with Let America Vote and really go hit those communities that feel the real impact of these anti-voting right legislations. And now that we have discussed a few of the organizations that you can go ahead and donate your time and effort and everything to protect voting rights in America, we would just like to do a brief recap here. So today we've discussed voting rights in America. We began with Garrett and Zane discussing the historical context of voting rights in America, beginning with the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment previous to the Civil War, and then ending with the Voting Rights Act of 1965. It then bounced off to Michelle and Sophia, which went to discuss about the current standings of voting rights in America today, with that being the Georgia Voting Act that we're seeing, the 2013 change to the 14th Amendment, as well as the 2019 and 2021 renditions of the For the People Act. Before lastly, I myself discussed a variety of excellent organizations that you can go ahead and donate your time, effort, and finances towards to protect, preserve, and promote voting rights in America, especially for those people that, don't feel represented with that vote. And this has been Idly By, which it's titled that because we don't want you to sit idly by. You can't sit idly by when it comes to voting rights in America. And this has been presented to you today by Team 6 here, which is Garrett, Michelle, Sophia, Zane, and myself, Zachary. So thank you all for watching, and hopefully today, by participating in promoting these voting rights in America, we can, have a better society. So thank you.